Hello, we're going to try something a little bit new because I have to, because my technology is not cooperating. But we're going to be talking today about greatest common factor. So in your notes, page 37, and then you see that says the greatest term that can be. So the first blank there is divided into, which means it is a factor of. So you might remember GCF, or greatest common factor, from working with fractions and trying to reduce fractions, but we're going to look at it with polynomials here. So some of this is going to seem a bit like division. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to identify the GCF, and then we're going to factor with it. All right, so this very first step here, we're just looking at these to see what they have in common, because remember, GCF means greatest common factor. So looking at 18 and 12, think about what's the largest number that divides into both of those equally. So 2 does go into both, 3 goes into both, but 6 would be the largest that goes into both as far as the numbers. Then we're going to look at the p's, and we're just going to put these next to each other so it'll be our final GCF. We're going to look at the p's, and you want to take the lowest exponent because it has to be what they have in common. So if I said I have 5 sisters and you said, oh, I have 3 sisters, well, what we have in common is that we each have 3 sisters. We can't say we have 5 in common if you only have 3. So same thing here. Now look at the b's. So I have b to the second and b to the 7th. So b to the second would be the lowest. So that is what I'm putting inside this box. That is the GCF. Okay? So that is the GCF. So if you're just answering a question about what is the GCF, you just find the biggest thing that goes into both and you stop. More commonly, what we're going to be asked, though, is to factor using the GCF. So what that means is we're going to take what we have from our GCF. It gets written on the outside of some parentheses. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to divide both of these terms by that GCF, and we put what's left inside the parentheses. I think of it like reverse distributive property. We are trying to find the biggest thing that we can divide by without making any fractions, all right? And then in my mind, I think of it more as what would I have to multiply by to get back to the original. But it really is division. So 18 divided by 6 is 3. And this first term has 2 extra p's. So p to the second. The b's are the same, so nothing there. Then 12 divided by 6 is 2. And then that term has no extra p's, but it has b to the 5th. It has 5 extra on the powers of b. And then this would be our answer if the question said factor with GCF or factor using the GCF. So that's what we're going to be doing. So that was on page 37. And if you turn to page 38, you'll see that we have some examples. not attached to the computer because it won't attach to the computer right now. So we'll see. Sorry for the delay while I do all this little stuff. Yep, it's going to bother me if there's one little tiny black dot, so I'm going to have to like erase really, really well. If it was a paper, I'd probably have a hole in it. All right, so as you turned over to page 38, that first question, top of the grid, says 35 t to the 7th plus 20 t to the 3rd minus 5t squared. So you want to identify the biggest number that divides into everything. So that would be 5. And the lowest exponent, and they all have to have that variable. So if they didn't all have a t, you can't say they have a t in common. But they do all have a t. Second power would be the lowest. So 5t to the 2nd. So 5t to the 2nd, you're dividing, whether you need to write it or maybe you can just do it in your head. But to find out what's inside your parentheses, that's what we were doing. We're dividing. 35 divided by 5 is 7. Subtract those exponents. 20 divided by 5 is 4. Subtract those exponents. Negative 5 divided by 5, that's negative 1. Subtract those exponents, so no t. Now to check yourself, you could just distribute, just like we just did on the polynomials test. So hopefully this is an easy next step from what you just did. So that was number 1. So you might pause me and do number 2, and then come back to see what number 2's answer is. So go ahead and pause. Well, how'd you do? Hopefully you did well. 6 was the largest number I could come up with that goes into 12, 18, and 24. They do all have a k, but only the first power, since that last one only has 1, so that's why it's 6k. And then 6 times 2 would make 12. That one has 2 extra k's, so k to the 2nd. 6 times 3 makes 18. This one needs 1 more k, because one of his k's is accounted for on the outside. And the last part would just be plus 4, no k, because he only has 1, and it's already accounted for on the outside. So go ahead and try number 3. Actually, you might wait and let me tell you about number 3, because it's going to be a little twist. We never want the first thing inside the parentheses to be negative. So if you see the first term is negative, make your GCF negative. Right, so next one, I got my erasing done. Negative 32, r to the 4th, s to the 7th, t, minus 8, r, s to the 4th, t. So we have 3 variables here, plus we're starting with a negative. So you might have noticed we don't usually ever see like a parenthesis with a negative here. That just looks really awkward, and we don't want to see that, all right? So if the first term is negative, we're going to make our GCF a negative number so that the first guy gets to be positive. Now, that might mean that it makes the other ones negative. That's okay. So 8 and 32. 4 does go into both of them, but is there something bigger? Does 8 go into the 32? It does. So we're going to use negative 8. When you get done, you don't want anything inside the parenthesis. You don't want the 2 terms to have anything left in common. Because if you don't, if I use 4, I wouldn't be taking the greatest common factor. Then I look at my r's. Remember, this guy counts as 1, this counts as 1. So it looks like r and s to the 4th and t. And those are not supposed to be written inside. Oh, geez. There we go. So that's my GCF and a t, because they both have a t. So first power of r is the lowest, fourth power of s, first power of t. Again, they both have to have it before I can count it in the GCF. So now, you may be able to do this without writing it underneath, but if you're not getting them right, or if you feel like it's a lot to try to remember, it's going to be good to write them underneath so that you can see what's happening. So negative 32 divided by negative 8, there we go, positive 4. Subtract the exponents just on the r's first, then our s, subtract the exponents, and then there would be no t because the exponent is the same. Then negative 8 divided by negative 8 is positive 1. R's cancels out, s cancels out, t, that's it, just plus 1. Do not be tempted to just leave that off. Remember, when you distribute, you should get back to the original problem. So if we would forget, if we had forgotten this, and we tried to check our answer, when we would distribute, we would get negative 32, r to the fourth when I add, s, 4 plus 3 is 7, t, and that would be it. And it would be like, well, what happened to the negative 8 rs4t, right? So we need to also have a 1 there. So if what's on the top and the bottom is exactly the same, we do want that 1, and then 1 times anything is just itself. And so we should see that that matches what we had at the top. All right, so try number 4 with the C's and D's. Pause me and then check and see. Okay, so hopefully we are in agreement. I'm going to kind of double check mine and talk through that. I'm just talking through the check. 9 times 11 is 99. 1 plus 3 would be c to the fourth. 2 plus 6 would be d to the eighth. 9 times 9 is 81. 1 plus 2 makes c to the third. 2 plus 4 makes d to the sixth. And negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. C, d to the second. Awesome. I hope you did well. There are several small parts. And again, if you are writing the GCF under each term to show your division, perfect, perfect. Please don't try to skip that if you need to do it. As you go, you might find some of the problems you don't need to, but particularly when we get these ones with multiple variables, it may be very helpful to do that. All right, so same thing. I'm going to try number 5. Pause me, come and see how you did. Okay, hopefully your answer is similar. Again, you might have written the GCF underneath, but GCF should be negative. And since 8 doesn't go into 44, we can't use 8. So negative 4, lowest power I see of E is 4, lowest of F is 3, lowest of G is 2. So I'm subtracting those exponents, dividing the coefficients, and then that last one, since all the exponents are the same, is just going to be the constant negative 11. Okay, number 6, be sure that you look for the largest number that goes into all 3 of those. Okay, so you can see what my answer is here. I went through it kind of quickly, so I'm going to work back through writing this. So 12, yeah, so if you did 6, then inside your parentheses, if you used a 6, you would have still had 6, 10, and 4. And those would still have something in common. So if the coefficients inside your parentheses still all have something in common, that tells you, oh, I should have went bigger, or I could have went bigger, and I haven't taken the greatest common factor. All right then, so let's see how I did. So we've got our greatest common factor, 12x squared y squared z to the fourth. I'm dividing 36 by 12 and then subtracting 2 from 8, 2 from 8, and 4 from 8. That's where I got my x to the 6, y to the 6, z to the 4th. 60 divided by 12, negative 5. Subtract those exponents. These would cancel. So there's no y. And then 6 minus 4, z squared. And then on our last term, all of those variables would cancel. And so this is our final answer. It's a monster, but it's our final answer. All right, so you have a choice today. And I'm going to give you a couple examples from the next page. But your choice today is to finish the problems on page 39 in the notes, and then snap a picture of that and email it to me, text it to me, however. Or if you don't have a page in your notes that says GCF and says page 39 at the bottom, IXL, AA1, and AA2, all right? But particularly for my term 2 people who are in class, if you want to finish the things on paper and then snap a picture of that, that will be fine. I am going to give you at least one more example from that because there are some where they don't all have each of the variables, which we really haven't seen things like that yet. So I'm going to be going over to the other side of the page, and I'm going to go down to number 11. So number 11, also lots of them where you need to be sure that you're using a negative as your GCF. So let's look at number 11 first, since I already said that. That is 10yx squared. Don't get wigged out about them having x and y in different order. I'm not going to require that you move those around. Okay, so when I look to see what they have in common, I look at the coefficients first. I see everything ends in a 0, so remember from your divisibility rules, that means 10 goes into everything. And then I look, do they all have a y? Yes. Lowest power would just be y. Now, do they all have an x? No. Okay, so the lowest power of x is just x, but these two guys over here, they don't have an x at all. So we cannot put an x on the outside as part of our GCF because it is not something that they have in common. So only 10y is the GCF. So each part is just getting divided by 10y. That leaves us with x squared minus 3x plus 6y plus 10. And that last one doesn't have a y at all, doesn't have any variable. All right, so from there, the next one that I am going to look at with you is number 8. So number 8. Partly because of what happens with the signs. Okay, so here's number 8. And when we look at number 8, again, you want to find the largest thing that divides into everything. So 10 would work for 30 and 40, but it doesn't work for 45. So we're going to have to back off, come down smaller. 5 would work for everything. And the first one is negative. And I don't want that first one to be negative, so I need to make my GCF negative instead. So my GCF is going to be negative 5. Then I look for variables. Do they all have a y? Yes, just to the first power. Do they all have an x? No. So x cannot be part of our GCF because it is not something that all terms have in common. Now we're ready to divide each part by negative 5y. So we're dividing each part by -5, taking away a y, -8x plus 9, no y left. Okay, so all of them that start with a negative, your GCF should be negative to get full credit on the assignment. So that's number 2, number 3, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14. Probably more than half of them. Okay? Again, the other lessons, if you prefer to do the IXL, would be AA 1 and 2 on IXL. Okay, so your choice, which you want to do, or if you want to do both for some extra practice, you are welcome to do that also. This is something that we're going to build on, and we will be using also when we get to Algebra 2. Not this term, but yes.